Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All Gurus, Sri Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj. Let me see.
Who is reading today?
I'm reading today, Prabhu.
Yeah, please go ahead, Mataji. Yeah, I'll share my screen also.
Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye. Nasta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhavati uttama sloke bhakti bhavati naishtake. Hare Krishna to all the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. Today we'll be reading from Canto 3, Chapter 28, Kapila's instructions on the execution of devotional service. And we're going to be continuing with text 34. By following the course, by following this course, the yogi gradually develops pure love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, in the course of his progress in devotional service. The hairs on his body stand erect through excessive joy, and he is constantly bathed in a stream of tears occasioned by intense love. Gradually, even the mind, which he used as a means to attract the Lord, as one attracts a fish to a hook, withdraws from material activity. Text 35. Translation. When the mind is thus completely freed from all material contamination and detached from material objectives, it is just like the flame of a lamp. At that time, the mind is actually dovetailed with that of the Supreme Lord and is experienced as one with him because it is freed from the interactive flow of material qualities. Text 36. Thus situated in the highest transcendental stage, the mind ceases from all material reaction and becomes situated in its own glory, transcendental to all material conceptions of happiness and distress. At that time, the yogi realizes the truth of his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He discovers that pleasure and pain, as well as their interactions, which he attributed to his own self, are actually due to the false ego, which is a product of ignorance. Text 37. Because he has achieved his real identity, the perfectly realized soul has no conception of how the material body is moving or acting, just as an intoxicated person cannot understand whether or not he has clothing on his body. Text 38. The body of such a liberated yogi, along with the senses, is taken charge of by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and its functions until its destined activities are finished. The liberated devotee, being awake to his constitutional position and thus situated in samadhi, the highest perfectional stage of yoga, does not accept the byproducts of the material body as his own. Thus, he considers his bodily activities to be like the activities of a body in a dream. Text 39. Because of great affection for family and wealth, one accepts his son and some money as his own. And due to affection for the material body, one thinks that it is his. But actually, as one can understand that his family and wealth are different from him, the liberated soul can understand that he and his body are not the same. Text 40. The blazing fire is different from the flames, from the sparks, and from the smoke, although all are intimately connected because they are born from the same blazing wood. Text 41. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is known as Param Brahma, is the seer. He is different from the Jiva soul or individual living entity who is combined with the senses, the five elements, and consciousness. Text 42. A yogi should see the same soul in all manifestations, for all that exists is a manifestation of different energies of the Supreme. In this way, the devotee should see all living entities without distinction. That is realization of the Supreme Soul. Text 43. As fire is exhibited in different forms of wood, so under different conditions of the modes of material nature, the pure spirit soul manifests itself in different bodies. Text 44. The yogi can be in self-realized position after conquering the insurmountable spell of Maya, who presents itself as both the cause and effect of this material manifestation and is therefore very difficult to understand. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purport of the third canto, 28th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam entitled Lord Kapila's Instructions on the Execution of Devotional Service. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Thank you so much, Mataji, Devi Shakti Mataji. So we'll go for the... This is the end of the chapter, the last few verses from 34 to 44 of this chapter. If you recollect, somewhere in the 25th chapter of this canto, third canto, Mother Devahuti was asking questions to Lord Kapil Dev, who happens to be appeared as her son only, Kapil Dev. So, but he is the Supreme Lord, we know. So now, Mother Devahuti asked 4 questions in that chapter, 25th chapter. One was about how can I overcome this material illusion as aham mameti consciousness, me and mine consciousness, in context with in relation with the body. That was the first question she asked. And then that was explained in the same chapter itself, 25th chapter itself. And then she also asked another question. Second question was about what kind of bhakti I should perform like that. And in the same chapter, he explained how by the bhava bhakti, raganuga bhakti is what we should perform like that with spontaneous emotions. But if you're not able to do that right now, then we should perform bhakti that is based on the regulative principles like Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. That's how he described it. And then that's the answer to the second question. And then third and fourth question she asked to compare and contrast Bhakti Yoga with Jnana Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga. So third question was about, she wants to know about Jnana Yoga. So Kapil Dev explained Jnana Yoga in a couple of chapters, 26th and 27th together. That where the emphasis was on empirical knowledge as a cultivation means of yoga. Of course, all these yogas need to be combined with Bhakti Yoga for perfection. Then after explaining Jnana Yoga, then he's explaining the fourth question she asked, which is Ashtanga Yoga. That is what this whole chapter was about, explanation of Ashtanga Yoga for perfection as she asked. This is also called, it's also called as Yoga Mishra Bhakti, or that means Bhakti that is mixed with Yoga. And then sometimes is referred to as Bhakti Mishra Yoga. What is the difference between these two? When the primary focus of somebody is actually conveyed in the last term of the phrase. For example, in the Bhakti Mishra Yoga, the primary focus of the practitioner is Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga. And then they're mixing little bit of Bhakti that is coming in the fact, Bhakti Mishra Yoga like that. Opposite is Yoga Mishra Bhakti. That means the primary focus is Bhakti, but there is some Yoga mixed like that. So this is this particular thing is actually talking about Bhakti Mishra Yoga. That means the focus is Yoga, but they mixed Bhakti because that is the only way to get perfection. So in the beginning of this chapter, we saw how Kapil Dev explained. This is very similar to the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, but little bit different kind of details. But we notice in Bhagavad Gita 6th chapter, Ashtanga Yoga chapter, the focus has been on the physical activities, physical sitting posture. How does he actually do it in terms of physical things like that? That was the main focus while explaining the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga. So we heard from Bhagavad Gita also, the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga are Yama, Niyama. That means like do's, rules to follow, and rules to prohibitions to follow, and regulations to follow, like that. Do's and don'ts. Yama, Niyama. Then asana, that means different yoga poses, which are also meant to regulate the body and the mind, especially pranayama, which is meant to control the breathing, which controls the mind. For what purpose? For helping in absorption in the later limbs of Ashtanga Yoga. And then Pratyahara, which is taking our senses away from the sense objects. That means we should not see anything, we should not hear anything, we should not taste anything, we should not touch anything, like that kind of thing. That is a severe practice Ashtanga Yogis do. Whereas our practice as Bhakti Yogis is simpler in the sense that we don't have to restrain from sense objects. We actually engage our senses with sense objects in a favorable way for Bhakti. That means, for example, we take prasada, we offer food to Krishna and we accept the food like that. And we see beautiful form of Krishna, or we hear beautiful kirtans or Krishna Kada about Krishna, like that. Whereas in case of Ashtanga Yogis, they need to refrain from all those activities, which is very difficult because we're used to doing things with the senses, not easy to restrain senses. That is about Pratyahara. And then he explained about Dharana. Dharana, which is the overall meditation on the form of the Lord, especially yogis, they like to meditate on the form of the Supreme Lord as Paramatma. So looking at the overall form of the body is called Dharana. And then dhyana comes much later at advanced stages, wherein they meditate on a specific limb of the Lord. That's where we heard nice descriptions in the last section about a beautiful Supreme Lord's form. So that way that will enable the yogi to meditate on the form of the Lord. Instead of imagining, oh, the Lord may be like this, Lord's hands may be like this, Lord may be wearing this, Lord may be wearing that. The scriptures give exact descriptions of what Supreme Lord wears in terms of ornaments, how the Supreme Lord's different limbs are, like that. So that will enable the yogi, we saw, is meditating the lotus feet first, and then it goes gradually upwards all the way till the face, like that we heard. So that's the dhyana aspect. That means the meditation on the injured limbs of the Supreme Lord. And then finally he comes to the stage of samadhi. That means a complete absorption in the Supreme Lord, like that. So that's the Ashtanga Yoga limbs we discussed, and also we heard the beautiful form of the Supreme Lord in that context. So now, after describing that dhyana aspect of Supreme Lord, now the next section, now current section, there are two sections now from 34 to 38 is describing the liberation of the yogi and the state of his mind. That means how he's detached from everything material, because he understands his real identity as a spirit soul, like that. That is one aspect being discussed in the next set of verses. And the following set of verses is how such a yogi who is already self-realized, what is his thought process? How does he see everything? How does he see everyone? That's what is being described. So these are actually higher stages of a liberated yogi. That's what we are seeing in this set of verses today. So now let's go to the individual verses now. Going to 34th verse onwards. There are two main principles also, are themes discussed in this section. I'll cover them also as we go through that. So going to 34th verse. So by following this course means by following Ashtanga Yoga, the yogi gradually develops pure love for Supreme Person of Godhead, Hari. So, and it's described in this verse that he develops symptoms of bhava, where ecstatic symptoms are described. Hairs on his body stand erect through excessive joy, and he's feeling, he's getting tears of intense love. like that. Those are symptoms of bhava or ecstasy. So then he says, gradually, even the mind, which he used to attract, which he used as a means to attract the Lord, as one attracts a fish to a hook, withdraws from material activity. So the mind also is taking away from material activity is described. So in this purport, Prabhupada emphasizes on how we can observe the mind. He talks about how we can observe the mind by practical devotion service 24 hours of a day. That's how Prabhupada describes it in this verse. So he says, when one's love for the Supreme Lord in devotion service is fully developed, one always sees the Lord, even without artificially meditating on this form. Now, Prabhupada focuses on two aspects. One is absorption of the Lord doesn't necessarily need to happen only by meditating only. So, but by engaging in practical different processes of devotion service and practical actions of serving Lord in different ways, we can be absorbed. That is one point he's making. So the same thing explained in different ways. When we are actually situated in devotion service already, that means we understand our position with relation to Krishna. When we are situated in serving Krishna in different ways, then we don't need to do artificial meditation like an Ashtanga yogi does, like that Prabhupada is describing. In fact, we know from Bhagavad Gita also, I believe in 8th chapter, is described how for Ashtanga yogis, uh, we know 6 to 12 of Bhagavad Gita is talking about Bhakti yogi, Bhakti path of Bhakti. However, it gradually develops into Bhakti in the 9th chapter. In the 8th chapter, it points towards how Bhakti will be. And especially, there is a major section in the 8th chapter that talks about Ashtanga Yogi, how he, when mixed with Bhakti, how he achieved perfection. So in that context, in Bhagavad Gita, we hear how they do this chant or the mantra of the Om chanting. And then that acts as a vehicle, and then their form of meditation is the goal or destination. Basically, through Om, they're achieving the destination of particular form they're meditating in. Like that is described in that chapter, 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. In the same context, the later verses of 8th chapter, we also hear how actually Srila Prabhupada writes Hare Krishna Mahamantra so many times in this chapter, fully in the purport. So, in the case of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, it acts not just like a vehicle, but also acts like a goal. That means, as a devotees, the point being emphasized is, as devotees, we don't have to meditate on the form specifically while chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Because Hare Krishna Mahamantra chanting itself gives the goal of going to Golok Vrindavan without having to meditate on particular form of Supreme Lord like that. That is the emphasis Prabhupada gives in the purports in the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So we can see that also here in the purport in a different way Prabhupada is expressing. Basically, we do a devotional service nicely, including the chanting, which is also a meditation of the Supreme Lord. But we don't have to specifically practice this dharana and dhyana that this yogi is doing. Of course, we heard from Sri Krishna Prabhu already a couple of days ago how when we take the darshan of the deity, we can still take the deity's form in by looking at the form of the Lord from the lotus feet all the way up and capture that so that we can carry that image throughout the day. But that is not the primary process for us of Bhakti Yogi. That's what is being emphasized here. It's not that that should not be done. That's not good. That's not the point Prabhupada is making. That's not the primary process for us. Primary process is engaging in devotion service, having understood our relation in relation to Krishna. That's what he's emphasizing in this purport of 34. So now, further descriptions of the liberated soul is being described. When the mind is thus completely freed, this is in 35th verse. When the mind is thus completely freed from all material contamination and detached from material objectives, it's like the flame of a lamp. The mind is actually dovetailed with that of Supreme Lord and is experienced as one with Him. because it is freed from the interactive flow of material qualities. Prabhupada focuses on this one with him aspect in the purport, so that we understand what does this oneness mean and what does this oneness not mean. So both positive meaning and what is not the correct understanding, Prabhupada clarifies in the purport. Prabhupada uses the word nirvana a few times in the purport also. Normally, nirvana word is generally used by Buddhists to mean voidness, or after with this life, we'll experience voidness, like that. There is limited understanding from Buddhist perspective. But Prabhupada clarifies this understanding properly in Bhagavad Gita also, and here is elaborating it here. That oneness of our identity with the Supreme Soul or the Supreme Lord is not just mixing ourselves with the Supreme Lord and our identity is lost, not that aspect. Always we'll keep our individual identity, like Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains in 2nd chapter. You remained as individual soul all along, and I remained as individual super soul all along. So we'll stay all along like that. We'll never mix like that. So that is one portion Prabhupada is expressing in this purport now. Second portion is, what is the oneness then? The oneness is about oneness of our desire with the desire of the Supreme Lord. That which is we can even experience in this material world also to a certain extent. Let us say we love somebody, then we like to do what they like, what they desire to please them. Similar way, when we love Krishna, when we develop for love for Krishna, then we like to do understand what do they desire, what Krishna desires, what does Krishna like the best. Then we want to do what he likes. So same oneness is described here in terms of oneness of our desires with Krishna and oneness of our actions in coordination with Krishna's desires and Krishna's will, like that. And that is very clearly understood by us. How do we understand Krishna's desires and Krishna's will? Through Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. So that's where we hear what does Krishna like, how does Krishna like, what kind of qualities Krishna likes, how does Krishna likes us to relate with others, how does Krishna likes us to serve him. Like that we understand from Shastra, and then we act accordingly. We know from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam several places, Krishna describes who's more dear to him, somebody who's serving him, somebody who's offering obeisances to him, like Manmanava Madbhakta verse, right? Like that, he describes several places who is more dear to him. So we act according to that. That is the oneness being talked about here. In the later verses, actually coming up verses, we'll see Achintya Beda Beda Tattva is also talked about. In that context, we'll discuss about oneness and difference again. Going to the next verse, 36th verse. In this verse, so such a liberated yogi. Remember, these are all high stage of perfection, transcendental perfection. The yogi realizes the truth of his relationship with the Supreme Lord. He discovers that pleasure and pain, which he attributed to his own self earlier, are actually due to false ego, which is a product of ignorance. So that means the yogi at a liberated stage, he's understanding that whatever activities are happening with respect to body in interaction with the material nature are not being done by him as a soul. They're interactions of the material nature only. That's what he's understanding. That means when he understands that he is separate from the body, then he can see that body is interact with the rest of the sense objects. And that is what is causing the material happiness and material distress. He can understand that. So remember, all this started because he can understand this is a spirit soul separate from the body. That's a important understanding. Only because of that, he can see, like an observer, the body is interacting with the sense objects like that. That's why he's understanding that earlier he thought, oh, I own this. I want to enjoy this, like that he had. Because he was in the conception of body earlier. Now he understands that understanding of earlier, which is I want to enjoy this, I own this, I want to control this, is a bodily conception. It is born out of ignorance or avidya. That means ignorance of the real knowledge. That is a spirit soul, not this body, like that. That is what is Prabhupada explaining in the purport for our clarity. Basically, earlier, people were in the bodily conception. All of us we in bodily conception, thinking that we are identifying with our body, and then everything related to body as mine. That aham mameti consciousness that Devahuti talked about. But then as we practice Ashtanga Yogiga, and then with a tinge of bhakti also added, then finally, at a liberated stage, one can understand I am separate from this body. So identification with body is material conception only, and identification with mind and enjoyment that results from it or suffering that results from it is not directly to me as a soul. They're happening to body only. That they'll understand. That is why a liberated soul is not affected by material activities, not affected by material happiness and material distress. That's why they can be in equanimous position. The equanimity quality that is discussed, that's so they can be situated in it, not by artificially practicing it, but by realizing that we're spirit soul separate from the body. So Prabhupada identifies here in this purport that the individuality that we as a spirit soul still is maintained, but only the desires are in accordance with the desires of the Supreme Lord. That's the other point Prabhupada makes in the purport. Going to the next verse, 37th verse. Yeah, okay, this is the elaboration of the previous verse, where after achieving the real identity that I am the spirit soul, then such a liberated soul has no conception of how the material body is moving or acting. Just like an example is given. So this is taking the previous verse to the next stage. So previous verse was describing liberated soul understands that material body is interacting with sense objects. That's why material happiness and distress is happening. That is one stage. This verse is taken to the next stage. He's not even seeing that material body is interacting with sense objects like that. To explain that concept, example given is Kapildev is giving the example of an intoxicated person. Intoxicated person means somebody who drinks alcohol or some intoxicating substance he accepts. Then they cannot understand whether or not he has clothing on his body. He cannot understand whether he has clothes on the body or clothes are gone now. So the point is, he's not so much the intoxicated person lost the physical awareness of the body like that. So, but in case of a liberated person, is not that he lost the awareness functions, not like that, but because he's completely dovetailed with the desire of Krishna, then and 100% is dedicating his activities in service of Krishna. So he forgets his materially bodily demands like that. Prabhupada writes in purport. What does it mean? We all have an experience. Let's say we are absorbed in something very, very interesting. For example, some people may be interested in even mundane activities like watching a cricket match or something, watching a movie or something. Then they don't feel hunger. But as soon as that activity is finished, which they were so absorbed in, then the hunger will come in place. They will realize, oh, I was hungry. I didn't realize it like that. Similarly, these liberated souls, when they are engaged in 100% service of the Supreme Lord, because they are so much absorbed, they are so much relishing that activity and fully, not only in terms of physical activity level, but also in the mind and intelligence, fully absorbed in Krishna. That's why sometimes they don't even care about bodily demands like that is described. We hear examples of our Goswamis, 6 Goswamis in this stage. For example, we hear primarily about Raghunath Das Goswami, who exemplifies this quality of austerity and renunciation. He was not, he used to take only 1 cup of buttermilk every day, but he used to be able to sustain because his bodily demands are gone naturally for him. Because he's so absorbed in devotion service, he used to be able to actively work with the spiritual strength is is deriving from his sadhana like that. So that is not to be imitated by us artificially, but naturally bodily demands will reduce as we grow in our spiritual life like that. That's the point coming from the 37th verse. Now, further going to the 38th verse. 38th verse is saying, the body of such a liberated yogi, along with his senses, is taken charge by Krishna. So that means body is in control of Krishna. And the liberated devotee, being awake to his constitutional position, and thus situated in samadhi, that's the last limb of Ashtanga Yoga, remember? That's where it's going. Does not accept the byproducts of material body as his own. Thus, he considers his bodily activities to be activities of body like a dream. So, it's here a nice analogy is given of a dream. Basically, let us say all of us, we may take in a dream, I may be a king, I may be a president, I might be a prime minister, I might be doing this, I might be doing some different things. That means I may be in a different body altogether in the dream. But then moment I come out of the dream, I'm not thinking I'm the president or I'm the whatever body I took in the dream. I came out of that illusion automatically as soon as I came out of the dream. Similarly, liberated soul doesn't identify with the activities of the body that are happening currently, because he understands this is the temporary aspects. That means he's not so strongly attached with the family, so strongly attached with the physical activities of the body that are giving temporary pleasure like that. So that's what is being discussed. Because for him, it's like how we can relate to the dream and body in a dream. Similarly, he thinks this body is not of such consequence. Of course, he maintains the body for performing devotion service, but not for anything more than that. Even in the higher stages, they don't even care about the body's maintenance also. But we're not to imitate that currently in our current stage. So basically, he's not accepting the worldly concept of life that is being mentioned. Another aspect in the verse we heard is how Krishna takes charge of his body. So this we hear here right from introduction of Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada talks about, which is depending upon our level of surrender, Krishna takes control of our senses and body that much. That means, let us say I'm doing a lot of mistakes. I cannot say Krishna made the mistakes through my body, or Krishna made me make all the mistakes through my body. So at our conditional stage, Krishna is controlling only as much as our submission is there today currently. Whereas the pure devotee is fully submitted to Krishna. That's why Krishna gives them right remembrance, right intelligence, and guides their activities fully like that. That is the principle we can learn from this verse. So the more we increase our submission to Krishna and our desires to serve Krishna more and more, then the more we'll be acting purely, because Krishna is guiding our activities like that. And how do we develop purity in our life? Primarily purity comes through performing bhakti, which is characterized by Sravanam and Kirtanam, primarily chanting of the holy name and hearing the holy name, hearing the Krishna Katha like that. So we need to all aspire to have that purity so that we can always do things to please Krishna. We might always wonder, how can I please Krishna always? We hear that always, Samsiddhir Haritoshnam, how can I do that really? That can happen with purity more and more. How can purity come? Through process of bhakti only. We don't need to do something else separately and then become pure and then come back to bhakti. So that's the important principle here. Now going to the last section of today, 39 to 44, this is talking about how such a yogi thinks. How does he, what is his thought process? What is his consciousness? Like that is describing at the highest stage of liberation. So 39th verse talks about he can understand. Normally, we have great affection for family and our wealth and our things like that. So we think it's my family, my money, my home, like that, right? So, but the liberated person understands they are different from him. The family and wealth are all different from him. So he can understand that he and his body are not the same, because he's in a position of spiritual understanding, that is spirit soul. So now, so he's not attached to the things that are related to the body. That is the point being expressed here in this context. The purport explains, Prabhupada explains in purport beautifully. For example, we actually see so many children, but because we understand these two children are mine, we develop so much affection for them. That conception of mine. Similarly, bank may have billions of dollars, but we attach to our thousands of dollars that we have. Similarly, somebody is in bodily conception is attached like that, whereas liberated soul understands is separate from the body, so is not affected by that attachment, like that is described. Of course, while we are in the as practicing devotees, this doesn't mean we leave the family, we don't take care of the body, we don't take care of the money. No, that is not the conclusion. This is describing about the liberated soul. So until we are there at the stage, we take care of what is required for body to keep it in good health, what is required for family to take care for responsibilities, and then what is required to earn enough money to maintain our family, even some savings to take care of emergencies, like emergency fund, savings to take care of our retirement, so we can take vanaprastha, like that. All that is needed to be taken care of, but not with the attachment that they are mine, like that. Now going to the 40th verse. So this liberated person's yogis consciousness is being described further in the next set of verses with example of fire, smoke, and sparks. That is the example, nice example coming up. In the 39th, 40th verse, he says, the blazing fire is different from the flames, from the sparks, and from the smoke, although they are all intimately connected because they're coming out of the same wood, like that. So now, this verse and the coming up verse are describing Achintya Veda Abeda Tattva. So this is a common theme in this set of verses. So I'll explain the theme, so then we can breeze through the verses also. So we heard Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu popularized this Achintya Veda understanding of this of our existence. So here in this particular context, Achintya Veda Tattva is explained with this analogy. For example, a wood has fire, and fire also has small sparks. Remember, sparks are part of the fire, but they're also individual sparks are also there, individual also, right? And then similarly, smoke is also coming. So now this analogy is used to explain how the fire is like the Supreme Lord, and then the sparks that are part of the fire but also have individual identity are like the individual jivas, are the living entities, and the smoke is like the material nature. Like that it is described basically, this analogy. So that means we are jivas in this analogy of spark, how spark is part of the fire but also has individual existence, because we are able to say this is a spark of the fire, like that we can identify it. That means some individuality exists also. So how spark is part and parcel of fire and at the same time individual, similarly we jivas are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, but at the same time we maintain our individuality. That is what is being explained. And we are different from the body or the material nature or material world that is around us. That is like the smoke being compared in this analogy, like that. So he understands that, liberated soul understands that. So primarily two understandings are being given here. Not only liberated soul understands that he as a soul is different from the body, like how spark is different from smoke, number one, but he also understands he as a spark is simultaneously same and different from the fire. That means he as jiva is simultaneously part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, but at the same time, I am not the Supreme Lord. That important understanding Prabhupada is emphasizing in these purports here. That means Supreme Lord is different from me, even though I'm part and parcel of me. Actually, Prabhupada explains one beautiful logic. if I'm part and parcel of something bigger, then I cannot become that bigger identity anytime. I will always be part and parcel of Supreme Lord like that. Similarly, I as spirit soul, when I'm part and parcel of Supreme Lord, I can never become Supreme Lord like that. That's another explanation Prabhupada gives in this set of purports. So that's the main understanding that's coming from this set of verses. Let me look through if there's any other point here. Yeah, the another point in the last set of verses is that what is the vision of such a liberated soul? So because he's seeing himself as spirit soul different from body, he can see others also as spirit soul different from body. So then somebody's in a smaller body, somebody's in bigger body, somebody's in animal body, somebody's a human body. He understands still they're all part and parcel of Supreme Lord and of spiritual nature. That's why he can see them as a spiritual being, each of them like that. That's how we can relate to them with respect, with understanding that they all have potential to do devotion service. They all have potential for perfection like that, you can see. So that's the last two verses. And then the last verse, the last 44th verse is emphasizing how to be perfected like this, to go beyond this Maya, influence of the Maya, we need to be take shelter of the Supreme Lord. Only when we take shelter of Supreme Lord, we can be overcome the influence of the Maya like that. Daivesha Gunamayi, Maya Duratya is very, very difficult otherwise. But by surrendering to Krishna, by taking shelter of Krishna through bhakti process, then Krishna will give us mercy. With that mercy, we can go beyond the influence of the Maya. That's how Kapil Dev is concluding this chapter on the yoga. Specifically, yoga mixed with bhakti also here. And then the next chapter will be even more beautiful because it will go back to bhakti to conclude Kapil Dev's teachings again with bhakti again. How bhakti is the best path to do for all of us. Yeah, we'll pause there. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kupasindubhyevacha paditanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you so much, devotees, for your association. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Pranam.